and complaint.
It's the 23rd of April, 2023. It's Sunday, 7 o'clock. You know what that means. It's time to engage with you on matters that affect you, matters that affect your family, matters that affect your community. Tonight, refugees and asylum seekers. It's topical. Hey, very good evening to you, South Africa, those watching around the world. My name is Blaine Herman, and this is It's Topical. Our digital audience with us tonight. There you see them. Good to have them on the program. Valuable voice indeed. And just a reminder, digital audience, if you have any comments or any questions, get those virtual hands up, and I'll try my very best to get you on air. Refugees and asylum seekers in the spotlight. The scenes outside the United Nations High Commission for Refugees in Brooklyn, Pretoria this week has pulled into sharp focus the plight of refugees, people camping in the area outside those offices for the longest of time. A court eviction notice was executed. Over 100 people now evicted. Lindela Repatriation Center. We're going to talk about that. Seemingly, it's not a good option for many. Why? Human rights activists are seeking shelter for families who are desperate to stay together and who don't want to go to that center. What is so bad about that center? We will discuss. Which leads us to the question of the week. And we're asking you, what do you make of the eviction of refugees? About 100 refugees and asylum seekers who were living on the streets of Pretoria. Let us know at It's Topical SABC. Come, let's get you some context. What are the root causes of forced displacement in Africa? It forms part of our conversation tonight. Also, as a country, do we have enough resources at the moment to offer the kind of protection that refugees need? Share your thoughts with us at It's Topical SABC. Perspective coming up. But now, time for your roundup. All right, the family and friends of 32-year-old Katlego Bereng, whose charred body was found in Mangaung Correctional Center, Cell 35, are reeling from shock and grief. The young man's body was allegedly used as a decoy when the man dubbed as the Facebook rapist, Thabo Bester, escaped from the correctional facility in May last year. Authorities have confirmed through a positive DNA match with the mother that the body thought to be that of Bester was instead that of Bereng. They have been looking for Katlego since March 2022.
Last week Friday, what I the DNA test.
2 weeks ago, a police officer came to take DNA samples. I asked them why they were taking DNA samples and whether there was some new information. They just told me that there were unclaimed bodies at the mortuary, and other families were also being tested to ascertain the identities of the deceased.
To
Thabo Bester, my message is that, my brother, repent from everything that you are doing. I don't know what has gotten into you to do all these things. That people are crying, parents are crying because of your action.
Right, the remainder of the refugees who were evicted from outside the United Nations offices in Pretoria on Friday have been accommodated at a farm in Bronkhorstspruit. NGOs have been assisting some of the families who refused to go to the Lindela Repatriation Center on Friday to find temporary shelter. This is how things unfolded.
If you do not vacate the area, the police will move in and request you to vacate the area.
D-Day, of course, is facing these desperate and vulnerable refugees and their children.
We ran away from our country because of the crisis. And that crisis is this international communities, they are causing it. And all of you, you are aware of that.
I never ready to UNHCR to go to Lindela. I never ready to UNHCR to go to prison. I want protection for my kids.
Where are your children? Where are your kids?
I don't know. Jesus, let South Africa do whatever they want. It's better to die, my sister. It's not a nice place.
Is it worse than here? One would say this is also not a nice place, taking these circumstances.
At least we have an option that they can hear us. They can see us. There's no justice. There's no democracy. Even there was democracy in South Africa, or they really justice. This can't happen like this. They're supposed to look the better solution. This is not a solution.
They clearly and only want assistance from the UN, which is for them to give them a letter that allows them to traverse the border. This is unfortunately not possible. The UN does not have the power to do this.
All right, we need context. And for that, we turn to the magic wall, what we need to know and why it matters. So what we know at this stage, refugees and asylum seekers have been camping outside the UNHCR offices in Pretoria for a while now. In an interview with the United Nations High Commissioner for Refugee spokesperson, Laura Pardon, said that this particular group of people have been living outside those offices for about a year now. The Gauteng High Court in Pretoria ordered their eviction, right? We understand that some were taken to the Lindela Repatriation Center while others were arrested. But as you've seen, some refused to go to Lindela. So I guess that would be the big question. Why? Is Lindela as bad as some are making out to be? We will discuss what are the elements in that place that people do not want to go there. We'll bring in the better minds and get you some answers as well. Also, with regards to how many refugees there are in the world, we're told 32.5 million refugees in the world, and this is as of mid-2022. 4.9 million asylum seekers as of the same period, mid-2022. I want to talk to you about here in South Africa, refugees and asylum seekers in South Africa. Over 250,000 refugees and asylum seekers living in this country. Now, with regards to the countries of origin of refugees and asylum seekers, these are the following countries that we managed to pick up: Burundi, Democratic Republic of Congo, Rwanda, South Sudan, Somalia, and Zimbabwe. Context always important. Why this matters, perspective coming up. All right, let's take you now to the regular feature, Word on the Street. It's where you have your say. And we took to the streets of Muckleneuk in Pretoria, where some of the refugees and asylum seekers had moved to following the evictions in the neighbouring suburb of Brooklyn, to get a sense of what people have to say about this burning issue. Take a look.
Because they already killed us, our mind, our emotion, everything is dead.
As a parent, this is not right for me to see children and being abandoned to be in the park. But then it goes back to the laws, so which is, I respect the laws of South Africa. And for me, I'm here as a citizen, as a neighbor who come and assist.
I'm ready to die, but I'm not die alone. I'll go with another person here.
When South Africa became a democracy, one of the primary objectives was to ensure respect for the rule of law and to ensure the right to dignity of every individual, and especially those who are historically disadvantaged or who find themselves in particularly difficult circumstances. So the South African government deliberately and in good faith took decisions to ratify all of the relevant refugee law treaties at both the level of the United Nations and the African Union. And therefore the government has undertaken to comply with the objectives of those treaties, which is to ensure the respect of the human dignity and the existence of refugees who've had to flee their home, like these refugees here.
I'm worrying about my child. First of all, they are human beings. So as a person who has a child, I cannot go to bed knowing that there was a 1-month-old baby sleeping at the park in an open area. But again, it touches on the issues of embassies. Why are they not involved in helping their own?
I know that South Africa is the country, the right is nice.
At the moment, we are here now. They are in South Africa, and this is a problem that is we are facing as South Africans. And I think that we need to do the things that needs to be done so that we can help them.
I don't know that I'm God, He knows.
All right, let's start the discussion. Let's get the better minds on the program. Follow me. Let's bring in our digital audience as well. We've got a number of guests on the program to add perspective on the current situation. Let's say hello to Nigel Branken, an activist at Kopanang Africa Against Xenophobia. We're also going to have Vusumuzi Sibanda, chairperson of Africa Diaspora. And later on, we will possibly be joined by Chris Neeson, commissioner at SAHRC. And we also invited the UNHCR. We were told that they weren't available, but we will endeavor to try to get their comments on the program. Nigel, to you first. Good to have you on the program. I know you've been hands-on with regards to what happened on Friday regarding the eviction, but first, give us some perspective in terms of the initial motivation of those people camping out outside those offices. What were they?
Hello, everybody. So great to be
Nigel, we are battling with your sound. We will try to fix it up. As soon as we do, we'll come back to you in a short while. Let's get the digital audience and talk about the issue at hand. Lesego, when you saw the people being evicted, you heard the pain. It was palpable, right? You saw the anguish. What were your initial thoughts? If you can unmute Lesego, go ahead.
My initial thoughts on it was really moving. If we consider the amount of pain that these refugees go through, the amount of struggles that they had to face, and how we have to also consider how bad it was how bad it was in Lindela. What is it? Is it Lindela? Yeah, Lindela. How bad it was especially when they don't want to even go there. We also need to consider how we treat our refugees in this country. I mean, some of these people are not really, they didn't come here because they really wanted to, but they came here because of the displacement. I mean, if we look at South Sudan, there was abuse of targeting civilians, and based on ethnicities and abductions, we could probably say it's because of civil war. So it was really moving. It was really moving to hear with the pain that they go through, the struggles that they go through. I mean, if you look at the stats globally, it's an international problem. Around 103 million people are being displaced every year. And we have to also consider that 41% of the population is are kids, children under the age of 18. So we have to consider how bad of a situation this is.
Duebs, Saji, you have your hand up, your contribution?
I also had, unfortunate to watch how these people were treated. I would assume that the Geneva Convention of 1951 has two interests. One of them is to protect right to life and freedom. Now, clearly, for people who have been displaced and who are here in South Africa, who have sought refuge here in South Africa, are running away from the freedom that they couldn't get in their country. And we've got Section 10 of our Constitution, whereby everybody has an inherent right to dignity. Now, if the people have applied to say we can't go to Lindela, we must be checking what exactly is happening in Lindela for somebody to prefer a prison and death than to go to a place, and the only place that has been provided for refugees in South Africa. So it shows that we really need to look deep to say what is happening in Lindela, because these people must be treated like humans. And so that's what I will raise.
Right. Nigel, let's try your line again. I think it's important to get your take because you were hands-on in that process. Oh, it's sounding a bit bad. Let's try that, Nigel. With regards to the initial motivation of camping outside. No, it's not good. Nigel, we'll have to come back to you. Maybe you can drop your line and then we will pick it up. I do apologize. Sizwe, let's get your take. Sizwe, if you can unmute. There you go. Where did Sizwe disappear
Refugees. The UN Refugee Agency, its role is to try and assist the governments of all the nations where refugees have fled to, so that they can be financially, administratively, in a way, be supported in order for them to be taken care of, and as well as be taken care of healthcare-wise. So our government's job was to basically try to find at least a piece of land, not big, but enough land for these refugees to be there, so that they can be able to access UN funded facilities like administration, like sanitation, as well as healthcare. All these people, they can be assisted through the partnership with regards to UN Refugee Agency, as well as South African government. So I think there is the disparity on how they are getting taken care of. So that's why they find themselves having to camp at the UN Refugee Agency there. So basically, they're just wanting UN to intervene with regards to being taken care of. And our government is not coming on board to identify at least a piece of land like all the other nations where refugees have been camped, like at Greece. I think the refugees at Syria are camped there. It's been over 5 years now, but they are still there. They've been taken care of by the UN, not the fiscals of Greece. So we're looking at a disparity between what government needs to do and what the UN can do. And I think there was a clip by one of the human rights activists. They mentioned that there is no proper action being taken by our government to try and assist the refugees, and we find ourselves in the situation.
Dupi, let's bring you into the conversation, then we'll go to Evans. No doubt we have made a commitment to help, right? But the question becomes, given this current state of play, does South Africa have the resources at the moment in order to give the protection that refugees currently need? What's your take?
Oh, thank you very much, and good evening to the viewers out there. In South Africa, I don't think the government itself has got enough resources to can provide for all the protection that the refugees and asylum seekers need. Hence, I took an approach of introducing a non-encampment system like in other countries that accommodate refugees, so that they can be able to provide for themselves and their dependents. That is why most of the asylum seekers, when they get their permit, if you look at condition 3, it will state that they have the right to work and study if those are above the age of 18 years. And if it's below the age of 18 years, it will be only the right to study, because the government realized that it does not have enough resources to can provide the needs of all the refugees who are coming to South Africa. Hence, it took that approach. And it is a good approach, because whilst they are accommodated or hosted in South Africa, they will now be integrated and then contribute meaningfully to the economy of South Africa. And this now, it's one of the challenges that refugees are facing out there. Because one, they don't have, some of them, they are struggling to access documentation from Home Affairs. It can be said that documentation processes have been made easy, but the reality on the ground is that access to documentation at Home Affairs, it's very difficult for refugees. And if you look now in South Africa with movements such as Operation Dudula, if you don't have a permit, they will attack you because they don't know your status, whether you are a refugee or an asylum seeker, because you don't have a status. Hence, that is what led most of those people who are camping outside the UNHCR offices today to be back. Because if you look back at this situation started in 2019 after the xenophobic attacks. I was part of the people who were responding to the issues of the refugees who were there. So they camped there because they wanted UNHCR to protect them, and the protection that they wanted was resettlement. And looking at the way resettlement processes work, the UNHCR was not able to provide such what they needed. Some of them, after the eviction orders were given in 2019, some were taken to Lindela, some were taken to Ho Chi Minh Mall. And those who were in Lindela, the reality is Lindela is not a conducive environment for the refugees themselves and their children.
What information do you have that says that this is not conducive?
I was there. I intervened. I was part of the task team that went to Lindela in 2020, a year after they were taken to Lindela. I was there. I saw for myself. I did not hear from anyone. I was part of the team that went to assess the children and the individuals in the hope of encouraging them to leave Lindela. Because remember, the officials from Lindela were questioned by the Portfolio Standing Committee in Parliament to say, what resources are you using to keep these people in Lindela? Because this facility is a waiting facility for people who are waiting to be deported to their countries. And if you are hosting refugees in Lindela, what budget are you using? So those were the questions that they were asking. I was surprised to hear that the order has been given that they should be taken back to Lindela. And majority of those who are evicted now are coming back from Lindela because they were dropped at the UNHCR offices in May last year on the 22nd from Lindela.
Right, we did, just to put on record, we did invite the Department of Home Affairs. We haven't heard back from them. They need to answer certain questions. We will endeavour to try. Nigel, let's try you again. Evans, I know I'm going to come back to you in a short while. Nigel, let's just give you third time's a charm. I think it's the fourth time we're trying now. Look, some of the issues that you picked up with regards to Lindela and the pushback that you're getting from refugees and asylum seekers. What's so bad about that place?
Yes, so I think, particularly from this group of refugees, because to know that they were evicted and went to Lindela, and when they were in Lindela, they've experienced the conditions there for themselves. And in fact, I think during the period, one of the refugees that was evicted there died in Lindela. When I was talking to people on Friday, many of them were saying, if you send us to Lindela, you're sending us there to die. I also understand that currently Lindela doesn't have any water. I mean, we are very fortunate. Very few have ended up in Lindela. I believe there's 2 or 3 families that have ended up in Lindela out of the group that was evicted on Friday. The majority of people have been relocated to the farm outside Bronkhorstspruit. There's been, I think it's 8 adults who have been arrested, and I think it's between 3 and 5 children who've been taken away through the Department of Social Development. So I think according to the refugees themselves, Lindela is not a place that's suitable. The conditions are difficult there. Of course, Lindela is a detention center. It's not a refugee center. And when they went in the past, although the court order now says that they're able to come and go freely, it's just many people described it as a concentration camp.
Chris Neeson, a commissioner from the SAHRC, human rights at the base of what we're talking about here. We commit to help as a country. They come, people, refugees fleeing persecution, etc., come to this country seeking help. We give them status, permits, but are we helping in the way that they should be helped? Talk to us about the resources that South Africa has in order to affect change in their lives. Oops, Chris. Oh, I think we're having a bit of an issue with Chris. Let's try to bring in Dr. Vusumuzi Sibanda, chairperson of the Africa Diaspora Forum. Doc, I hope you can hear me. Let's get your better mind on the situation regarding generally in Africa that leads to forced displacement. What are the factors that South African public needs to be aware of What are people running away from?
Well, look, I think we've got a very good case, in study now in Sudan. And we know that what is happening in Sudan, for example, will spill over, to all the countries surrounding, Sudan, like Chad, Ethiopia, up in Egypt. I mean, those effects, are what makes people, it is not by choice, but people are forced, they are displaced. And, because of the political instability, mainly political instability, either between warring factions, in the country, not necessarily because only the government, but also the governments that are failing, to provide, stable, governance and environments in their countries.
Yeah. Let's try Chris Neeson again. Chris, I hope you can hear us.
Yes, I'm back.
I understand that you just landed or you're about to take off, so hence you're in the car. So appreciate your time. Yeah, talk to us about South Africa's role in, when we commit to help, we need to help. And are we doing justice to the cause?
Well, we must first say that the South African Human Rights Commission and its commissioners under the leadership of our chairperson, Professor Majola, we've always maintained that the South African Human Rights Act and that also the Constitution, that everybody that lives in South Africa at any given time, their rights must be respected and be upheld and protected. And in this case, we have, as the Commission, always endeavored to ensure that all those who live in South Africa, that their rights be respected and protected. The issue about what happened in not only in Pretoria, but also in Cape Town, we must please understand that those are two of the issues that have triggered a debate and a situation in South Africa where it's not only about the refugees, it's also about asylum seekers and also about illegal non-nationals in our country.
Correct.
And thus far, the South African government has indeed upheld the right for everyone living in this country as we deem it and as we push it to ensure that those who are here, asylum seekers and refugees, and including even non-nationals are illegal, although Home Affairs will take its course in terms of dealing with all of these issues. Remember also, South Africa is the only country on the continent that has not decided to have camps for refugees and asylum seekers. And because the philosophy of the South African government is that we need to integrate whoever comes here into the broader South African society and not to put them in camps. And that is what we believe. And we have thus far, and as the Commission, been really in the forefront of protecting that right for people to A, to be integrated, B, to have all the rights associated with non-nationals, whether asylum seekers or refugees or even illegals. However, we need to understand the situation behind the Pretoria and the Cape Town of the refugees and asylum seekers and others that have staged and engaged in that out of frustration because of the lack of the proper process of facilitating the documentation. Hence they were. But the second thing, they have asked that they be resettled in a third country and leave South Africa because of the issues around xenophobia, legitimately, and also because of some of the crime which affects everyone in this country. And they've asked to be resettled in a third country and not go back to the country where they come from.
Now, whose responsibility is that, Chris? Say, for instance, people come up and say, look, I came to this country, I don't feel safe anymore, I need to go. Whose responsibility is it then? Is it the UNHCR? Is it government? Is it both?
It is not government's responsibility. The United Nations High Commission on Refugees, when you're in a camp, in everywhere in the world, the United Nations High Commission on Refugees take responsibility for you. But because of the policy of the South African government, that because of where we come from as South Africans who were in exile, we decided not to have camps and that people must freely be integrated into the South African society. The United Nations High Commission on Refugees have got a policy that they do have a process by which individuals apply to be resettled in a third country. That happens It doesn't happen en masse, as they explained to us, and we've explained to everyone that we've engaged in, refugees and asylum seekers, and also non-nationals that are illegal. They've explained that to us. It's not a mass program. It's an individual application that people do. There's an assessment being done by United Nations High Commission on Refugees, and thereafter, whether you're successful or not successful, you then go to that third country. But the point is that the Home Affairs also, and we know there are problems there, but we must also give recognition for the hard work that they've been doing. Because what they do, when I as a refugee or asylum seeker apply, they look also at my application, we stay here for a few years, and then they go and check the country I come from, whether it's stable or not stable, and then they make a decision. There's a tribunal, there's a review board, there's all of this in place. And people stay for 20, 30 years. The process, we must say, must be sped up, because so that people that are here can feel safe and can feel that they are being attended to. But it's not the South African government's responsibility. But also at the same time, I also say that, you know, there's one person in Cape Town that was a leader of a group. He has been deported. He's now staying in the country where he comes from, where he said that he's unsafe. He was there. He tweets now every day on this platform. However, we need to say to Home Affairs, please, can you not speed up the process for asylum seekers and for refugees so that they face and receive a space of comfort and security and certainty.
All right, clarity sought, clarity given. Chris, thank you very much indeed. We need to take a quick break, lots more to discuss. What are the options for refugees? What about voluntary repatriation, reintegration within communities? How is that process unfolding? More next. Welcome back. We're talking about refugees. You saw what happened on Friday in Pretoria, the eviction. You heard and felt, I guess, from the visuals you saw on the SABC news channel, the pain and anguish that many experienced. Some of the visuals we bring you to you now. Let's get options for refugees in South Africa. I keep on saying that as a country, we're committed to help. Now we've got to help, right? Being another conversation maybe is to see if we have the resources at the very moment to help. That's another conversation. But let's bring in our digital audience and get their take. Lerato, you had your hand up. Is Lerato with us? Let's get your take. If you can unmute.
Am I audible?
Loud and clear. Go ahead.
Thank you so much for the platform. My stance is simple. When I saw the videos that were ongoing, obviously I have sympathy for the refugees who are affected, but this also made me question the kind of leadership that we have in our continent as a whole, because it makes you wonder how bad the conditions are in African countries for refugees to even be placed in South Africa to a point where they say, I mean, we had the woman say she'd rather die than to also be placed in Lindela. So I think this goes on to say our African leaders need to do better. I mean, they did soar in to provide service to our people, and it's about time they start doing this, because I'm standing here also questioning whether as a country we have the resources to take care of our brothers and sisters, which is our fellow Africans, because as a country we are also faced with our own problems. Our economy is not stabilized, inflation keeps increasing, and as you know, we have load shedding. So that's one of my questions and my concern. If truly do we have the resources to take care of our Africans? Thank you.
Evan, what do you think? Can we afford to take care of our African brothers and sisters?
Thank you very much. I don't know if I'm audible.
You are. Go ahead.
I believe that in terms of resources, why can't our country form a relationship with other countries that
Evan's line is not true.
And take those refugees to the country that has resources to cater for them? Am I audible?
We battled a bit, but you saying that forge relationships with other countries and find out better options? Is that what you're saying, yeah?
Yes, forming relationship with other countries so that if we can afford, if you can afford them in terms of resources, so that we have another country that can take over to help our fellow brothers and sisters.
Right.
And when watching the visuals there was a lady who was speaking about laws. I believe that in these circumstances, in this thing, we shouldn't instability of human beings.
All right, Evans, your line is not too good, but I think we got the gist of what you were saying. Let's go to Mpulusa. Get your take.
Thank you very much for the platform. Am I audible?
Loud and clear. Go ahead.
So I was going to raise a few concerns. One, there is a difficulty in striking the balance between respecting and honoring international law, but also looking at the situation that South Africa is currently in. So balancing both interests is difficult, and I must just put it out there. But I wanted to raise the concern about the vulnerability of children and women within the situation, about them being exposed to violence during this time of displacement, and also to put children through, it's very traumatic seeing you being separated from your parents or for your families. So that's also something that comes with this factor of, seeking refuge and being displaced. And I'm also very concerned about the consequences that this might lead to opening up other kind of worms, such as maybe xenophobia. People around the social media have been raising things of why people can't they just go back to their countries, but without being cognizant of what exactly is happening within our neighboring countries. But I also led to the question of, we always speak about regional and African integration, but this situation makes us really think if we are making, as African countries, progress in terms of African integration, if we as African countries cannot come together to actually address these bigger questions of refugee issues, because it's not something that's just happening within South Africa, but all over. Are we together as African countries able to come as a collective in order, even if it's policy, laws, that we can be able to address this? Because again, it's a reflection, like Lerato had said, of the crisis that we have in our leadership, but also the crisis that we have within African countries. One of the ladies at the beginning of the audio said that it's something that we are all aware of because of international structures that do exist that are putting them at such a disadvantage. The mere fact that as people we know, but we turn a blind eye is a very big question that has been raised during this time.
You raise important issues. I just want to get Nigel's take on some of the issues. I've heard the UNHCR spokesperson saying that around 15 people of that group have chosen to voluntarily return to areas in the DR Congo that is safe to do so. I wonder, in terms of voluntary repatriation, what sort of conversations are being had with the refugees there as a viable option for them?
Yes, so I think there has been, so what has happened in the court is that the court has appointed lawyers for human rights as amicus. The refugees have chosen not to be represented, and I think that's part of the reason why the court order appeared the way it was. The refugee stories weren't really able to be heard. But certainly there's a lot of challenges around resettlement, because a lot of the refugees with children, their children are not documented, and there's a huge documentation backlog in South Africa. We've heard estimates of up to 15 million South Africans being undocumented. So, of course, we've got the challenge of undocumented foreigners in the country as well. But with these particular group of refugees, some of them, their children born, I spoke to one woman whose child was born 8 years ago and still has not got any documentation. So they can't travel without that. So it is something that Lawyers for Human Rights is working on, trying to get the documentation in place. There's a lot of problems that these refugees are facing. Many of the children who, as a result of not having documentation, haven't been able to attend school. I spoke to a 14-year-old child yesterday, on Friday, who hadn't attended school at all because of documentation challenges. So we've got to sort this documentation out. There's a whole lot of rights that need to be met before, and then only can resettlement be considered as an option.
Right. Layers, obviously, to go through. Dr. Sibanda, voluntary repatriation is the return of refugees or asylum seekers to their country of origin, but it is also based on free and informed choice. Who is informing refugees that this is an option, that their country is now, or certain parts of the country is now safe to return to? What sort of discussions are happening around that?
Well, look, in the majority of the cases, there isn't much information and discussion around that, obviously because, the UNHCR, in my view, I think just like what was said earlier, to say that the UNHCR should be the one that is looking at, the ability to settle people to third countries or not. And the view that obviously, because South Africa doesn't have camps and the UNHCR wants to take a back seat, we've had that from last year, in 2019, when the director, of the UNHCR in the Southern African region said that. I think it's actually, an unfair statement, and it's actually, in my view, quite irresponsible because, the UNHCR has a responsibility, overally as a well-funded body and part of, the United Nations to ensure that there is adequate information, unlike a situation where you'll have people opting to go simply because it is unbearable to be in South Africa in terms of their livelihoods. And again, there is no help that is coming, from the UNHCR. And ultimately, they say, maybe we might leave. But you see, they don't want to go there, but it's because they are left with no. So it's not a choice at all. There is information there.
All right. Matimo, William, and Neo in that order. Matimo, to you first.
Thank you so much. Good evening, and good evening also to the viewers. First of all, this is a very sensitive issue, and we should be very diplomatic as we're trying to suggest solutions to this matter. And regardless of whether we are diplomatic or not, we still have to be decisive in trying to deal with the issue, because this is a very, important and a pressing issue. It cannot be okay that people are being evicted in the manner that they are being evicted at the moment. But as also, the rule of law has to be upheld, but we also have to protect the dignity of the people that are in those streets and these groups. And secondly, we're in a continent with fragile economies and economies that are declining, and also that countries that have political instability and conflict. So this issue is going to be ongoing for a while, and because some of these people are here for greener pastures, and we should know for a fact that some of these people are refusing to go back to their native countries just because they've lost everything. So it's time for regional economic communities such as the SADC, East African communities, the West African community, and the African Union to have a collective voice, because the silence from some of the African leaders is also concerning. So we need collaborative measures and dialogues to find ways on how to deal with these issues, because it's going to be ongoing for a while, and I don't think we'll ever get to a point where it's going to stop, because South Africa is one of the economic hubs of the SADC region. So we need legislative instruments and other forms to make sure that this issue is dealt with accordingly. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. Let's hear from William and then Neo.
Am I audible?
Loud and clear, sir.
All right. Firstly, thank you for the platform, and I would like to send greetings to South Africans at home. With regards to this matter, it is evident that we are seeing these atrocities against humanity happen right before our eyes. And it's quite sensitive to see this happening in our own backyard, because we are so used to seeing all these problems in foreign countries. But now that this is also a South African problem, it is now brought to light the inefficiency that we've seen when it comes to the oversight of refugees in host countries. Because in as much as I can also indicate that, we understand that the government has a role to play with this whole refugee matter, it also begs the question about what is the UN's contribution towards eliminating these problems. Because in as much as we can see that our government is unable, or rather, let me say, our government is not in a position of aiding as much as it should be or can be because of its own problems. But now it also begs the question, where is the UN when all of this is going down? Because one can believe that they are responsible for the placement of refugees, but not for the oversight and the maintenance and overseeing the welfare of the people that are refugees. So it begs the question, where is an engagement between the UN with African leaders, with the AU, with our president as well? Because this shouldn't be something that we see frequently. This shouldn't be something that we get to see day in and day out, because as we said, it is an atrocity against basic human rights. So now we're just asking to see more of an engagement and more of helping from all parties in order to eliminate such a problem.
Right. As I said, we did invite the UNHCR tonight. They weren't available, but we need answers to those questions. Important indeed. Neil, to you, and then Jabulani.
Oh, am I audible?
Loud and clear. Go ahead.
Greetings to everyone in studio and everyone at home. I want to firstly take us back a bit to let's firstly understand that in South Africa we have refugees and illegal migrants. And this takes me to the matter where you have to realize that in South Africa, when it has to deal with such things, when you find illegal migrants, they come here with a different purpose. So now this to South Africa itself damages the economy in many ways. Because now you find refugees that are here, as they've stated, to get a better life, to run away from all the conditions in the countries. But then when they're coming, there are certain those who are coming into this country that are coming here with the damage of the country. So now how is it that the country is supposed to show the difference, and how are communities supposed to see the difference between the refugee and illegal migrant? Because we are starting to blame every foreigner for illegal act. And this comes back down to showing us who's a refugee and not. And to the issue of undocumented children, there are so many parents that want to repatriate to back home. So many refugees, but then they are sticking behind because of their children being undocumented. And this goes back to them being undocumented. So now, another question to the government itself: what is it doing to make sure that we people know who's permitted to be in the country?
The issue of documentation, etc., is something that many of our guests have mentioned. It's an important issue. Let's go to Jabulani. Jabulani.
Thank you so much for the platform. My name is Jabulani Bagani from the Northwest University, doing public governance with political sciences. I think I'm going to give this whole entire dialogue a historical perspective. In order for us to actually eliminate what's this refugee or the problem of refugees, we need to go back to history, and look at the root of the problem. Most of these countries that have a high number of refugees, it's because of colonialism, and the Berlin Conference of 1894 to 1995. I think maybe the United Nations should host another conference whereby they actually discuss the formation of the new world. I feel like the world is moving too quick without addressing the problem of human rights. We're building new skyscrapers, we're building new cities without first solving the problem of human rights. How are we continuing with life while other people are homeless and living in poverty or famine or racism or whatsoever the issue might be for them actually fleeing their country of origin whatsoever. We need a new conference, to dismantle the 1894 Berlin Conference and center the new world around tackling human rights issues. Thank you so much for the platform.
Jabulani, thank you very much indeed. So, Chris, let's bring you in with regards to, look, the sentiment is more talking, more communication, more collaboration on the continent to solve the issue of refugees. But for those who want to stay at the moment, we know the history and the reasons why people moved to that place outside the offices of the UNHCR in Pretoria. What sort of mechanisms are in place or should be in place to reintegrate those who want to go back to the communities? Because I assume it should be a multi-pronged approach, isn't it?
Absolutely. And we've got a number of cases in Cape Town where we've done exactly that. And the South African Human Rights Commission in its 9 provinces are working around the clock to ensure the protection of all people's rights, and particularly the vulnerable, and in this case, those asylum seekers and refugees, and including illegal immigrants. And we've been working around the clock to ensure that we support them and make sure that they are integrated and help them to integrate within the society. But the United Nations High Commission on Refugees have got programs and NGOs that they're working with that assist those individuals and families to be integrated into the broader society in South Africa. There are a number of issues that I want to raise, which sometimes sounds controversial. But a number of us, even my own family, my two late brothers' children are married to non-nationals.
Right.
They live in harmony in Khayelitsha and in Maitland. So you see, there are a number of people. Crime in this country does not choose religion, color, or nationality. Crime affects everybody. But however, we do understand there's always an exploitation of people with regard to non-nationals, where there's an opportunity for criminals and others to exploit those people and make their life difficult. However, it's very important that we must say that South Africa, unlike any other country, we want a reintegration into society, and therefore people have been mobilized in different societies to say, please protect everybody in the society, the vulnerable people, as far as possible. I heard my colleagues saying earlier on about the vulnerability of people. But every day, I'm engaged in people that have been evicted, South Africans that have been evicted, women and children from farms and from everybody else. They end up in horrific conditions. So we, as the Human Rights Commission say, doesn't matter whether non-national or South African, whatever your condition are, we will be there to support you.
Mr. Neeson.
The colleague also, another colleague says about the documentation, and indeed, that is a problem. It's a long process.
It is.
And sometimes people cannot go to the places. They come from Pretoria to Cape Town to Durban, from Cape Town to Pretoria. And then they have to go to the origin, whether it's Musina or whatever. So I think there must be a different way of handling the documentation. Then the last thing I want to say.
Just very briefly, sir. Go ahead.
Sorry?
You've got 10 seconds.
Undocumented people. There are a number of South Africans that we even have to write to chiefs and find hospitals where these South Africans were born. So it's not only for non-nationals, but also South Africans that face it. But from an education point of view, nobody must be excluded from that. That's a directive from the Minister of Education. Thank you.
Important point. Mr. Neeson, thank you very much indeed. And to all our guests as well, digital audience, appreciate your time. Value added indeed. Before we go, here's my take. There are often pernicious stereotypes attached to refugees, and this is the world over, right? I was reading an article about a 28-year-old refugee from Syria who mentioned a few. The belief that refugees come to countries to take people's jobs, that they show up for government handouts. The big takeaway from that article for me was the need to understand their plight individually. Now, a point an activist, I think it was Nigel, raised the other day, whether as a country we have enough resources at the moment to offer the kind of protection that refugees need is another story altogether. But as long as we commit to help, we need to find smarter ways to work out these issues. Because living on the streets, it's not safe, nor is it sanitary. Options. Reintegration into communities, a process that needs to be handled with care and understanding. What about the voluntary repatriation option? Is it a viable option? Only if it is safe to do so and based on free will and also informed choices. That's what the UNHCR points out. Once again, the situation calls for clear eyes and for the head and the heart to meet in order to give those who are deserving a helping hand. And that's my take. If you missed anything, please be sure to watch this episode of It's Topical on YouTube. Sports Live up next. Until next week, my brothers and sisters, take care. Bye-bye.